state parks. I go to different parks in my RV and do what they need to have done. Usually I take care of bathrooms. Here I take care of a lighthouse. I love this place. Anyway, my job is to give you a little bit of history of stuff that's gone on here. Our recorded history goes back 509 years when Ponce de Leon was sailing up and down the Florida coast drawing maps of what he saw. And on this island, there were 2 freshwater springs where he could come in and refill his water supply. So he did that fairly often. And on the maps he drew of this area, he named this La Florida in the year 1513. So it's had its name for quite some time. What he wasn't able to draw on his maps because he couldn't see it, in fact, we didn't see it until satellites were in the sky, is the 3rd longest coral reef in the world. It runs from north of Fort Lauderdale, past here, all the way down past Key West to the Dry Tortugas, and about 200 miles long. And that is about 5–10 feet below the water surface in some places. On the other side of the reef, it's 100 feet deep. The reef here is about 6 miles offshore. So in the days when there were no GPS, these captains would be sailing from the Straits of Florida, come around up here and sail in beautiful clear ocean, not knowing that 6 miles from the shoreline, they're going to hit a reef. And when they do, one of 2 things happens. They either split open and sink there, spilling with goods, or they spring a leak and sink somewhere else. We were talking yesterday, there were 2 Spanish galleons that left Mexico and came past here, made it past the reef, but we think they touched the reef and sprung leaks, and somewhere between here and Spain there are 2 big ships full of gold. If you find them, come see me. I'll take a finder's peek. But at any rate, all the ships that were washing up on that reef lost a lot of money. In the 1800s, Key West started to settle as a seaport, and they came up and gathered all these goods and took them back and became a trading post as well. And they made a lot of money, and they didn't have to spend a lot of money to make it. So they got very, very wealthy. And it's unfortunate that when some people get wealthy, some of them like to get just a little bit crazy wealthier, and that's what a number of them did. They would take their ships out and watch for a merchant to be coming around the straits, and then do things with their ships to trick that ship and run it right into the reef. They would then come alongside with a contract offering the captain safety for him and his crew in exchange for the ship and its contents. They were originally known here as wreckers because they were trying to wreck the ships. But we got to know them later as pirates, and this area was heavy with pirates. So Key West was bringing in a lot of money. That meant somebody was losing a lot of money. And that was the Spanish government, the shipping companies, the insurance companies, the folks with the materials that were being moved by ship. So they went to the federal government and asked for some help, and they said, well, the only thing we can do is help you with a lighthouse. We'll bring one down to you, and I'll tell you what that means. We're going to walk about 2/3 of the way down the walkway here. We'll stop again, and I'll finish up. 1820s. This lighthouse was constructed in 1825. In the 1820s, the closest civilized location with any people in it to the south was Key West, and it was 200 miles. To the north was St. Augustine. It was 300 miles, and there were no people or settlements whatsoever in between. So when they wanted to put a lighthouse here, there was nobody here to build a lighthouse, and there were no materials to build it with. So what they ended up doing was taking a lighthouse that they already built, one that they already knew how to construct, took all of those drawings and all of that material and put it all on ships and sailed it down here. And if you look over to the right, that's the house they built for the lightkeeper and his family. It's a 2-bedroom Cape Cod design, and the way it's built is the way it would have been built on Cape Cod. It's got a heavy roof for heavy snowfalls in the wintertime, and the first floor has large fireplaces on each end for those cold winter nights that never happen in South Florida. So anyway, that's what they knew how to build. They brought it here and they built it. It was originally 65 feet tall. It got taller. It was lit with 17 oil-burning lamps, the kind that have the globe on top that you adjust the wick, and there were reflectors behind each of them. So the lightkeeper's job was to keep all of those lamps lit at their absolute brightest, constantly fueled, constantly adjusted, and given off as much light as possible. In fact, the job of the lightkeeper, the job description has one item that caused me to shake a little bit. It said, ultimate self-sacrifice. And what that means, it's kind of like joining the military. What that means is, if that light has gone out, we know it's because you died trying to keep it lit. And that was the job of the lighthouse keeper. Now this one, when it was built, was visible 12 miles out to sea. But what that meant was, remember I told you the reef is about 6 miles. So if I pretend this tree is the lighthouse and the sidewalk here is the reef, I'm sailing here, I don't see the light beside it until I'm 6 miles away. And if I see it 12 miles north or south, I'm lucky. So it helped but it didn't solve the problem. Ships were still running on the reef. So they did their best till 1855, and then came along and said, look, let's take it as high as we can possibly make it. And they looked at the original structure and then decided that they could go up safely 30 more feet. So they took it to 95 feet, which is its current height. That made it visible 18 miles out to sea. So they were trying little bits at a time, but still didn't solve the problem. It's sad how they did, because they ended up shutting our lighthouse off. Let's go down and look and see how they fixed the reef problem. It got washed away in the storm. But in the late 1870s, they figured out how to drill into the reef and put a structure there that would stay there. And if you look out on the horizon there, straight out to the left of those boats that are moving, you'll see a tower that's a very steep triangular tower. Looks a little bit like the Eiffel Tower. That's called the Fowey Rocks Reef Lighthouse. That's one of 6. They got pretty tricky when they put those out there. They're right on the reef. They're every 30 miles to Key West. So we've got 180 miles of coverage. They're visible about 18 miles each. So as the captain hits the first one, he approaches it. Pardon, not the word hit. As he approaches the first one, he sees the light and stays away from it. He passes it. It gets dark behind him. The next one comes into view. And that works all the way down to Key West, where it's open and clear sailing. So aside from ships wallowing in storms and things like that that ran them on the reef, the regular problem with ships wrecking on the reef was solved. But they turned our lighthouse off in 1878. And they took our lighthouse keeper and his family and they put him in a little boat and they said, you live out there now. And they moved out there and this light sat unattended completely. Nobody touched it until except kids partying in the middle of the night. But anyway, I hear those stories. Until the 1960s. And that's where Bill Baggs got involved with the park. He's actually responsible for the park. He was the editor of the Miami News. And this whole area, the whole park, had been cleared for condominiums at that point, and the project just wasn't moving. And Mr. Baggs saw this property and the multi-bazillion-dollar view that we have here, which I think is the best in Miami, but impartial. He saw that and said, this needs to be a park. And the owner of the land happened to agree with him. So he was able to make a good deal. He bought it, the state purchased it for $2 million and opened on January 1st of 1967. At that point, they planted whatever people wanted to plant here. People brought in exotic plants that aren't normal here to see what would grow. And Australian pines took over the whole park. And they had done a repair job, a look-alike repair job on the light at that point in time. And that's the material that you saw out front as you were coming in. Some of it had rusted, and it really didn't hold up very well. But everything was like that until 1992, when the eye of Hurricane Andrew passed right over top of this island. And it took all of those Australian pines and wiped them out completely. Again, there was nothing growing here. And Miami stood up and said, we've lost our park. And they raised a whole lot of money with trusts and bricks and you name it. And they did a #1 first-class job, first of all, of restoration of the lighthouse and then renovation of the park. For the lighthouse, they got the drawings that they brought down here in 1855 and recast all of the cast iron parts. Everything is identical to the way it was in 1855. The foliage was all planted by volunteers, and what we have here is just what it would have looked like when the lighthouse keeper came out in the afternoon to make sure everything was ready to light up that night. So with our signs not here, this is what it felt like for him. Anybody have any questions?